So hello to everyone. So we've got Kat, Karen, Carol, Jan, we've got Margaret, Nita, and Kylie all joining us today. So that's great. So this is going to be a basic introduction to permaculture that's going to be covered in a number of episodes. This is episode 1, and this is really starting from the very beginning, which is basically what is permaculture and how do you start getting familiar with some of these design principles in your garden. So if we could just do some introductions. First of all, I'm Joel. I've been a member of PSN for about 2 years. I'm currently the secretary as well. I've been into permaculture for about 5 years, and I've been traveling all in different places around the world. So I haven't had a fixed location to practice it, but I've certainly helped set up a lot of gardens around the place and experienced a lot of the pieces of the pie. But this is possibly the longest time I've actually had to set up my own garden, which in our current rental place, we've been here about 7 months, something like that. And so things are starting to get underway, but always cautious, because in our last rental, we had to move out after about 10 months and had to relay turf, regrass our veggie patch. But apart from that, permaculture for me is more a way of thinking than anything else. So it's opened my mind up into different ways of relating between systems, relationships, my vegetable garden, my cooking, all of these, and how do these things all fit together, and how can I live the best life possible in line with the planet and with other people. So I might just go, we might just introduce ourselves to you, the other panelists. So Matt, do you want to just tell us whereabouts you are and why permaculture for you?
You're on mute.
Is Matt on mute? Oh, he's on mute. Sorry. He somehow got muted. I'll try and unmute him. Hang on.
Great.
Hello,
Thanks
Matt.
for that, Joel. Yes,
Matt,
I can speak
there we
now.
go. Okay, we can hear you.
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name's Matt. You may have already joined myself and my wife Katerina during some of our earlier live feeds, including the one of our garden. So I've been into gardening since I was quite young, watching Gardening Australia as a little child. However, for me, gardening was often about sort of tropical plants, and I was quite interested in those more ornamental plants rather than productive and useful plants. I spent some time working in a nursery whilst I was going through university. And then it was only probably about 7-8 years ago now that we're over in Europe, and we started becoming more aware of permaculture as a principle. And Katerina did an online permaculture design course. And as we're going through that, we're really captivated by some of the principles that sat behind permaculture and just how much sense they made. And so I was really surprised by how much of the gardening I've done in the past was really fighting against nature and what's around you, as opposed to working with you. And I think, for me, the greatest revelation was just understanding the role weeds play, noticing that weeds are actually an indicator of the soil. They heal the soil. And so often in the past, you just struggle to try and transform the land into how you want it to be, as opposed to understanding how it is and understanding ways of working with it. So that's been a really exciting journey for me. But as Joel's mentioned, it's not just about gardening. So just understanding the wider philosophy and how that links into relating to other people, to relating to community, that's really drawn me further into that way of life and the learning that you can get through it. So we started applying the principles originally to our balcony garden back over in Prague, and then to a rental that we had here in Sydney. And then at the end of 2017, we got a chance to move into a property of our own up at Mount Colah. And it was fantastic to really be able to plan out that whole garden and adapt and change it as we've gone. So we'll talk a little bit about that later.
That's great. Thank you for that, Matt. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how one person in the family might start getting into it, start doing a design course or watching some videos or reading a book, and the other partner's just peering over the shoulder like, oh yeah, that's really interesting, and it kind of makes its way in there. I think also when I was first hearing these principles as well, it was really refreshing to get these all coming from the same place, and to going like, yeah, that makes sense, and that makes sense, and I was wondering about that, and yeah, just also doing things from a bit of against the mainstream. If that's the kind of way that you like to live or like to garden, then hearing these things that actually, weeds aren't all that bad, and there's a different side of the story, is it's very satisfying. So we're going to go over to Selena now, and Selena, same question to you. What whereabouts are you, and why permaculture?
I'm in Thornley near Hornsby, and permaculture. I guess I started with, if those of you who watched the feed with Costa on last Saturday would have seen that I started with permaculture via Linda Woodrow's Permaculture Kitchen Garden, which wasn't really about the principles of permaculture, it was about how she implemented permaculture in her situation. And I found that a revelation in terms of thinking about, she talked about how, as Matt said, about how to working with nature rather than against it, about looking at what you had, using weeds as indicators or seeing their secondary uses, not making a rod to break your back in terms of gardening. Growing up, I think my mother was an avid gardener, but she does non-edibles. So, but I was actually very interested in edible garden, not a display garden, which has, always makes things interesting, because Mum is like, do you want some cactus? I'm like, I don't want cactus. But permaculture is one of those things that when I read the book and thought about it, it made sense. It sort of clicked with my worldview, with the way that I saw our society going, in terms of we use a lot of stuff, there's a lot of waste, and that nature doesn't really have waste. Nature turns the waste, or the waste products, into more inputs for the next round of growing. So I thought that was probably my big key, and all of a sudden it became a case of not just sort of not looking at it as, it's not vegetable waste, it's like worm food or chicken food if you had chickens. At the time I was renting with a couple of other people, and so I wasn't really able to implement, I thought about it, but I wasn't really able to implement it with these guys, and I decided against it in the end, because it was more effort than I was willing to put in for the time and place, and I've only really been able to really work with permaculture in the last 5 years. This property that I'm sitting in with so that's the front yard, and then the backyard's the garden. And that sort of, tried to build along permaculture principles.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, it's really interesting. That's three of us that have kind of come into it from almost like a philosophical perspective, that the philosophy and the worldview of it kind of all clicked with the way that we wanted to live and the way that we wanted to garden. So very good news is that our fourth panel member, Stephanie, has finally, the whole time, been trying to connect, and she's finally here. So I'm just going to connect her into this call. Stephanie, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm really sorry that I've stuffed up the technology, but can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you really well.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. So, of course, I don't know what the other people have said.
Yeah, no worries at all. So basically, everyone's just given a very brief introduction. So we know that you're Stephanie, but where are you and why permaculture for you?
Well, I'm at Pennant Hills, and permaculture for me, and I said in my video, you know, when Costa was here, that I really wasn't a gardener, but I am originally a country girl, and I think I've just grown up in a situation where you do use everything and everything works together. And even though I didn't practice that for a long, long time, it must have been there in the back of my brain, because when I actually did the introduction to permaculture course with Penny Pyatt at Ryde Horticultural College, which isn't there anymore. I mean, the college is, but the course isn't. It was actually like a light going off on. You know, it was just a sudden recognition that this was a system that I'd been looking for, and it just makes so much sense. And so I did that course and immediately got stuck into it, because it was just everything that I wanted to do, and I had to learn how to do. It wasn't sort of second nature, which you'd think it would be, but it wasn't. And I've had to learn everything and apply it, make mistakes, apply it again. But I just love it. It just makes so much sense that, you know, you shouldn't be producing waste. You shouldn't be leaving junk after you leave this world. It should actually be either nothing, not a negative, but at least nothing, and hopefully a positive. So that's how I got into it, and I've been doing it pretty well ever since October 2011.
Excellent. Wow. Yeah, this is it's coming up on your 10th year then of practicing. So really
Yes, that's right. That's right. It will be 10 years this year. Yeah.
fantastic. All right. So the basic we wanted to use this hour to kind of just go through with all of our panel members just how you basically started out in your garden, or how you go out into a site and how you would want to start turning the wheel and implementing some of those permaculture design principles. So for those who are unaware, one of the first things that you do when you're looking at a site from a permaculture perspective is doing your site analysis, sector analysis, and zone analysis. And these principles are, in short, are basically laying out your house and your garden in such a way that makes sense. So you would plant the things that you're going to use really often close to your house, like your herbs. You want to be able to go and grab those when you're halfway through cooking a meal, whereas your fruit and nut trees can be all the way down at the back of the garden, for example. But you're also looking at where the sun might be coming in. So where does the sun rise? Where does it set? These are really important factors. And so, especially in these Australian conditions, if you're talking about your Western aspect for a vegetable garden, that westerly sun is really has a strong potential to do some damage, or at least make your vegetables suffer a little bit. So in my rental garden, I don't have any big trees to shade that. So I've had to use a lot of shade netting. And what I found is that as I put that shade netting up, the plants have really started to flourish. So I'm going to go over to Matt now, and Matt, if you could, I'll just unmute you.
Okay,
Matt,
so
what's your perspective on just starting out with those principles on your site?
yeah, so I love David Holmgren's principles. So at some point we might throw a link in the comments as to where you can find them. But so many of them are just so helpful as you starting out and working out what to do. So one of those principles is slow and simple solutions. And I am the sort of person that would like to go fast and complex. That is more of my natural rhythm and way of doing things. And so for me, when we moved in, a lot of it was just slowing down, not getting too anxious, not trying to throw things in too early. And actually a good example of that, and I'll spin my camera around. So we had some fruit trees in pots, and so I was really keen to get them in the ground, but realised that the soil wasn't going to be deep enough. In fact, just as we'd started to build this gabion wall, I started positioning some of the fruit trees over where I thought they would go, and one of my avocados that I put here fell over and snapped, which was a shame. And then when I went to throw my lime tree in, I actually snapped it as I was trying to get it into the ground. So a few occasions where I was perhaps a bit too anxious, a bit too fast. And, that avocado, I ended up having to dig back out of the ground because it was just way too exposed here. So really taking your time, getting to know what the garden's like is so important. So Joel, you mentioned the sun, but it's important to recognise that sun will change position throughout the year. So if you start planting things too early, they might look fantastic in the summer, but get to winter, it perhaps is not so great. So you'll see, we've got our hoop house, which is, we thought, good spot to put it. We've got lots of vegetables that we grow there. And then what we've noticed is in the winter, we actually get quite a bit of shade from these trees over here. So this area is not bright enough often for some of those vegetables in the winter that need the full sun. So taking time was a good lesson for us. Noticing where the wind goes as well. So we get quite a strong wind coming from the western side that sweeps through the property. Now that's great for aerating the house. So puts a nice breeze that goes in through the house and out the other side. But it's helped us to recognise that some of the trees that need a bit more protection need to be sheltered away from that. So that's a couple of principles. I've got some more things I can share, but maybe some of the others want to share some of their first steps as well.
That's great. Thank you for that, Matt. I really love that idea of using the gabion wall to build up the soil. And so, yeah, if you've got this if you haven't got much soil to work with, it's just such a great way to add some extra depth to your garden. So we're going to go over to Selena now. Selena, could you basically the same question? What does it mean for you to apply the permaculture principles when starting out with a site?
I'd say that it means not making the mistakes that I did, which was plunging straight in and planting things without actually thinking about it in a permaculture context. The space that you see behind me, that's my garden. That used to be all lawn, and pretty much when I saw that when we bought this house, I thought it's a great place to put a garden. What I didn't think about at the time is that it's basically in the southeast corner of our property, and to the east is a double-story brick house. That's the house behind, like on the block behind us, and it blocks a lot of the winter sun. So I've had to work around a garden that, because I didn't really think about where I should put the garden to start with, then I've had to work around a garden that's in not perhaps the best position for all year round vegetable growing. So down towards on the down side of it, on the south side, then along this fence, which is the southern boundary of the property, it gets, it'll sort of get a bit of sun in winter, but pretty much in midwinter, I think just this bed here in the southwest corner gets sun and not very much of it, like at a couple of hours in the day. So what I have to do over winter, it does give my beds time to recover. One thing that a couple of the Brits have talked about is how in winter they get to plan, they get to sit, they get to think. So that can be an advantage too, to be able to think about what you're going to do for the summer. But it is a downer to not be able to sort of grow things year round so much. I have found I've got on the other side of the house, there's actually over on the north is pretty much open, and I've put some beds in there. Some were already there. We're just going to move around. Resource center.
Excellent.
Hang on. So this is the northern side of the house. There's a huge load of nasturtiums growing. And there's a couple of like beds that I've just turned into an asparagus bed, and some sort of just general, there's more nasturtiums growing right now. But in terms of site, one thing I've had to come to terms with, the house was built, it's a 1960s or so, fibro with weatherboard cladding. The downside is that we've got this giant driveway, cement, and basically in the middle of summer, it heats up. It absorbs heat and it radiates it. In the middle of summer, it absorbs heat and it radiates it out into the house, which is a downside. So on the upside, in winter, it's actually a really good place for growing things. So I've got a veggie pod there, and that gets sun all year round. It's been turned into a wicking bed because in the middle of summer, it needs that water to grow anything. So yeah, I guess other considerations about site is also like what your land was used for originally. Like Matt's talked about how at some stage, I think in his videos, he's talked about how their soil was like 10 centimeters deep and then you just hit rock. Here, it's a bit better. In fact, the area used to be a farm, and I discovered this after, to be honest, I discovered this after planting some stone fruit trees, which then took off. And I discovered the whole area actually used to be a stone fruit farm. So as it turns out, I like stone fruit, so my stone fruit does really well. On the downside, citrus doesn't do well at all here, so I still have to work on that one.
All right. Yeah. So, well, what a fascinating aspect that you often there's plants that you put in and they just want to get going. Isn't that funny that they were the exact plants that were planted there probably a few decades ago? So
I think it's also good to have that sort of check. Like, I think for me at least, it was necessary to have that. Okay, you've gone and done the wrong thing with your site, so you're gonna have to work around it now. What's the best way to work around it?
Excellent. All right, so we're gonna jump over to Stephanie now. And Stephanie, could you give us a short rundown of your site and how things got started for you?
Well, I think I've done the same thing as everyone else. Jumped in, done the wrong thing, lost plants, had to change things around. Really, the most important thing, and I think this is showing up with what everybody is saying, is that you must observe. You know, that's one of the principles of permaculture, and I think that is number one. Spend some time looking at your land, look at the topography, how it slopes, how it doesn't slope, look at the soil, look at where the sun comes from, what the trees are doing to block it, all that. See where the sun is throughout the year. And it's jolly difficult to wait a year, and probably you can't do it. But really it is worth doing. I think observation, followed by your design, and I think that is absolutely critical. I've always liked the idea of organic and that sort of thing, but with permaculture you must have a design so that everything will work in together. And once you've got your design, then you're looking at your earthworks and water management, and I think that if you can, it is definitely worth doing that. I mean, I'll just turn my camera around, or hang on, let me look. Yep. Okay, so I'm in my backyard now, and I'm just sort of, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got the house, which is actually only 1-story house, but it's 2 stories at the back. Then I've got all these trees around here. They're not my trees, they're neighbour trees, a few places away. And in fact, when it's winter, at the shortest day of the year, it's got about, I think the sun's at about 32 degrees, which is almost level with the horizon. But anyway, it's well below those trees, and I basically get no sun in the winter. It's a south-facing block. The north is totally obliterated as far as plants are concerned by neighbours' trees, so I don't do anything there. But so basically, I pretty well had nothing happening in the winter. But after all these, 9 years or whatever, I have removed the impediment to the only place I had sun in the winter, and that is here. So I have 3 veggie pods going down the hill against the fence line, and that is the maximum amount of sun I get for the entire winter, just about mid-autumn to mid-spring. So there was a bamboo grove there, and I just had to decide what I wanted most, veggies or bamboo, and the bamboo went, but it took a few. Got to have the sun if you want to grow veggies. So I basically started off with no veggie gardens in the winter, and in the summer I put in vegetable gardens, but I am not a person who waters things, and the fact is veggies need water. So I've had a few failures, but now I've got wicking beds, and I've also spent a few years storing water in the soil. You might be able to see this is one of my food forests, and I have got beautiful soil there now. Originally it was 100% clay, and I've spent years getting the organic matter into it by means of green manure, which I'm actually growing here for over the winter, because this is a flower garden I've just put in, which is a wicking bed, but I know that it's not going to have any sun from about next week. So I've put in green manure, and that'll be there over the winter, and I'll cut it down and it'll be ready to grow the flowers in spring. So I've used green manure, cover crops, mulch, which has sort of broken down and been added to year after year. And now you don't have to go very far down to get to clay, but got about 14% organic matter in the places that I've had it tested.
Wow.
And the organic matter is what stores the water.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yep.
Well done with that. Awesome. Yeah, so we I really like now that we're already getting into the how our panelists have worked with their own specific contexts, and it has been a rough run in the beginning in terms of jumping in there and getting started a bit too early, but in some ways it's really the only way to do things is to actually get out there, start trying stuff, make mistakes, and then learn from them. But luckily we have such a large community here, and also just so many resources available there online that you're guaranteed to make a mistake, but you can certainly read up on a few that you might have made online before you get started. It still didn't stop me from, in a couple of rental places ago, deciding I wanted to put all my seedlings in a nice cool spot, and I decided that the best place for the nursery would be under the deck where it gets absolutely zero sun. So obviously that wasn't going to work very well. Yeah, it's just but no regrets. You just have to get out there and try stuff, and then just then swallow your pride and say, yeah, I put my nursery in the wrong place. I'm going to move it now and see the difference. For my specific context now, it hasn't made sense to do too much permanent things. So putting in fruit trees is definitely makes absolutely zero sense, because we're potentially going to be moving on within the next year. But we were always going to be doing some sort of vegetable growing. And in the same way, constructing raised beds and that sort of thing didn't really make sense, because it's a lot more to remove when you have to move out. So we've trained up in learning how to start an in-ground garden bed. Check out No Dig raised bed online if you want to see how we did that. And I guess the other thing as well is setting up a good nursery and a good greenhouse that's probably way oversized for our little yard has made a lot of sense for our context, because it's the kind of skills that we're going to need to have when we eventually get our own place. Is we're going to have to know how to start our own seedlings, do our own propagating. So we have been working a lot with that, and it's also been great for crop swap. So in the spring, I was way overstocked with seedlings, and we were swapping for all sorts of other things, eggs and other cuttings. So it's worked really well in the end. Sticking to our context, which is that we're kind of staying on our toes a bit. Let's get back over to Matt in Mount Colah, who's going to pick things up from where he left off before, and maybe let us know a little bit more about his context and how things are going over there.
Thanks, Joel. Just a note, Steph and Sel, you can use your phone on landscape on Zoom, I believe. I know we were having problems with live stream and having to do it the other way around, but hopefully it'll work fine holding it on its side. I wanted to pick up on a point that Steph, or 2 points Steph was making, that the importance of having a plan and also the need to really observe. And I think when I hear the concept of plan, I think of somebody sitting inside with a drawing board, trying to put on paper what should work, and going out and implementing that. My dad is an architect, so see him spending a lot of time, sitting and drawing on a plan. And certainly there is a point where having a physical plan is helpful, but the important thing to keep in mind is you want to be observing and interacting. That's one of the principles. And so what you put down on a plan shouldn't be a static thing. It shouldn't be a once-off sitting down and planning it out, and it shouldn't be detached from the property you're in. So what I mean by that is spend time in the garden, walking around, bring those thoughts and ideas and observations and put them on the plan, but then go back out and observe again. And we've already heard a number of different examples of where people have discovered that something that they planned and put in didn't work well. And so another practical example of that is if I spin my camera around. So the paths that we've got here weren't something that we designed on a piece of paper inside. In fact, the way that these were planned out is Katerina spent a lot of time just walking through the garden and noting where she'd walked, noting the different paths we take. So looking at some of those types of patterns are quite important. When do you use the garden? What do you use the garden for? What are your movements throughout the garden? That's going to help you determine the way you lay things out. Joel mentioned earlier, what's close to the house, but also just think about where do you spend the most time, because that's going to dictate where you're going to keep an eye out for things. An example that we'll talk when we're doing the hive split. So Sue was talking about where to put your native bees. And Sue Patterson's done a lot of volunteer work helping establish and look after these native bees. And one of her observations was people that put them down the back, way out of the way, didn't notice when there were problems and diseases. And so she encourages you, put it close to where you're going to spend time. They're wonderful to watch, and you'll notice when something's wrong. So design isn't just about information you put on paper. It's about observing your own behaviours. It's about thinking about how you use the spaces around, taking note of those. And the other aspect is, accept feedback. Be aware of when a plan isn't working, when something doesn't make sense. A couple of other aspects. So although there is the need to wait and be patient, if you're wanting to get in and start somewhere, start with your compost heap, because on a regular basis, you're throwing things away. There are things that are going to go to the bin if you don't have somewhere else to put them. So composting is something that I'd really encourage you to start early. Where we put our compost heap may seem a bit strange. So if you think, when we first moved into this property, this whole back area here was lawn, and that was a beautiful corner at the top there with a deck, and they used to have a kids' cubby house. And so it would be strange to put a compost heap there. In fact, normally, had I been not introduced to permaculture principles, I would have looked at an out-of-way spot where nobody would see it and hide the compost heap away. But that top corner is the top of our property. That means that when it rains and all the nutrients from the compost get run off, they're going to go down through the property. So it's actually fertilizing the property. Whereas if we had it hidden perhaps down on that corner where the chook shed is, all that nutrients would actually be going out onto the street. It's also a fairly convenient spot for us to get to. So we're going to use it. We've got a fairly clear path to get up to there. There's a bit of space around there for us to do the shoveling. So that's been, I guess, one of the things that we were able to jump in and do straight away. And it's helped then to be able to feed the garden, use that compost as we're starting to establish the soil and build up the raised beds. We've had the inputs to put into that.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Matt. Yeah, it's getting started with the compost, or if you don't have the space for it, just a little a worm farm. It's the fertility of your garden. It's the powerhouse of organic gardening is your compost. This is what we're adding to our soil, and the garden really often can't get enough of it. So yeah, so it's a really good place to start. Selena, we're going to jump over to you now. What have you got to show to us?
Sorry, what was the question again?
We're basically just going through additional permaculture principles that we've thought of that relate to our garden, and what's specific to our context that we've been doing.
All right. Specific to my context, and you've probably been, if you've been watching, then my feed, then you can probably see I'm in the middle of a chook yard. This one's a temporary chook yard for our 2 new chooks. That one is not one of the new chooks. That's one of the old chooks, but she's asserting her dominance. I did actually let them out all into the same spot. One of the things I did when I came up with the idea of the garden, and that was largely due to Linda Woodrow's permaculture kitchen garden, was actually having chickens in the garden. So instead of segregating them away from the rest of the gardening, I've actually put them in the garden. And I'm just going to take you up to, so right here this is sort of the chook compost pile, so to speak. It's a yard that the chooks have access to through pretty much through the summer. In winter, I'm planning to regrow some of this, but basically they have access to it over the summer. It's got several loads of clippings from the neighbors, and we toss food scraps or bits and pieces. Christmas Day after we had a big family meal, then my sister actually had a bucket with kitchen food scraps here, and basically once Christmas Day was over, we came out here and we tossed it out there. And the chooks that we had, 2 of them at the time, had a great time scratching around in it. So that becomes then, compost. That's sort of the yard, but actually that one's a little bit separate to the garden that I grow. But one of the things that the way I set up the garden was here I've got garden beds, and the garden beds are about 90 centimeters by about 1.6 meters. They are precisely the right size for this chicken tractor to go on top. So you can see the base there and then the tractor on top. And pretty much I do in this chicken tractor the smaller version of what I'm doing out in the yard, which is tossing the green clippings. I put oat straw in there. I grow weeds like fat hen, which you should be able to see. And the chickens have access to that through the back, through a gateway into the chook tunnels behind. So those of you who saw my live stream would have seen the chicken tunnels that ran pretty much around the perimeter of the garden. And this was part of the design that I had from the beginning, which was to have the chickens in the garden fertilizing the soil. And so they're not just, they have multiple purpose. They're not just for egg laying. They also dig up the ground, they poop. Their poop adds manure and fertility to the soil. So yeah, there's a lot of things that the chickens add instead of just one. And I've forgotten which principle that is. I can't think of it right now. But yeah, so integrating the chickens into the garden. So there's that one. There's about 5 beds. Oops. All in various stages. And initially when I started growing things, nothing would grow. I had to add a lot of fertilizer, nothing to that this year. And corn is a very hungry crop. So I tip my, we throw them scraps in here. We throw them mulch. We toss their manure in there, which they poop for. And we pick that up and toss that in there. And then when they're wandering around there in the day, they also poop there. So over time, it sort of improves the fertility of the garden. It's like in the middle of the garden. So I don't actually have physically move the chickens around. They sort of can be taught to come at a call.
Thanks for that, Selena.
Cutting in and out. Oop.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Sorry.
So yeah, so we're getting a bit of, you might be getting a bit far from your internet router, I'm not sure. But I just love that integrating
Probably, yes.
I love integrating that chicken tractor into, it's usually used on, I guess, much bigger plots, and I've definitely seen it being done on a commercial farm scale. But what you've done there is you've got your beds and they're all the right size to be able to just rotate the chickens through and take care of the crops at the end of their.
Yeah, they also do the weeding and the bug fixing at the end. When I find bugs, I toss them to the chickens and they love it. Cockroaches. We have cockroaches. They're food for the chickens. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, we can't eat them, but the chickens can, and then the plants can make use of that. So it's really just wonderful having a way to integrate animals into your garden, and that's one of the things in the beginning of the permaculture thing is nature doesn't try and garden without animals. So we should try and bring animals into our gardens in any way we can.
Nita just asked about what do you do if you can't fit chickens in your garden. Other people use guinea pigs, I think rabbits as well. Matt's neighbor across the way has rabbits, is it? No, they're guinea pigs. She's the guinea pig rescue lady. So guinea pigs or rabbits also produce manures, and they can also be used in very small they can be used in smaller contexts than chickens even. So, but the yard that I'm in is like 6 meters by 8 meters, which is fairly small. I've got, that was okay for 2 chickens. I've got 4 now, so that's going to we'll see how that goes in the next couple of months.
Excellent. All right, we're going to jump over to Stephanie now, but just to also add, there's quite a few permaculture gardens in PSN where people have got quails as well. It's another great alternative to chickens. They're a lot smaller. They can't jump over the same height of a fence that a chicken can, and they're a lot quieter as well. So if you have neighbors that are complaining about the noise, then quails tend to be a lot more docile in that respect. So we're going to go over to Stephanie now. We had another question from Nita, which was, can you talk more about water and how to build that into a garden design? Stephanie.
Okay, I just have to say that my battery's getting a bit low. So it could be that, you know, this cuts off suddenly. But look, to me, it just emphasizes the importance of the design, because I think that's really important to get the water management and the soil management into your garden right at the beginning. I mean, I did actually get a lot of water tanks before I did permaculture, and I really don't need so many. But I'll just show you a picture of my drive to give you an idea of, can you see that? It goes up quite high, and the water rushes down there. So I've actually put in about 4 drains along that drive that siphon the water off to the side, and that will actually move through the soil down there. And then the other thing I do is collect water. Even though I've got full tanks, I can't help myself. I have to collect the water that happened, you know, over the last couple of days. And I do have a lot of wicking beds. Here's one that's an in-ground wicking bed. I did do a wicking bed little presentation a couple of days ago that shows you how to make them. But to me, water is pretty well everything, because, well, not everything, but very important. And I see Wendy Dwyer's garden, which is mainly pots, is far healthier and vigorous looking than mine. And it turned out she actually does a lot of watering. So I thought, oh, okay. So, you know, everything else she was doing was pretty much the same as what I do, but the water was, you know, far in excess of what I was doing. So as you can see, the garden's looking great, and that's because of all the rain we've had. And the only other thing that looks great is what I've done in wicking beds. So besides the wicking beds, there's this business of harvesting the water that actually falls on your land. And just before the battery runs out, I just wanted to say, if you haven't done a permaculture course, which I guess you haven't if you're watching this, I think you either should find one to do, or get Rosemary Morrow's book called Earth User's Guide to Permaculture, I think, and read that, because once you sort of read through something like that or do the course, you can actually see how everything meshes in with everything else. And that's why I think water is so important, because once you've got those things in, the rest can really follow. But I have down here some swales. Can you still see me?
Yeah, we can still see you. What's a swale?
A swale is basically a trench that's on contour, where the water will actually run into or fall into from the sky. It will stay level because it's on contour. It will sink into the soil and then run out from there. And that will give a water supply for roots of trees, basically trees that they can move down to and use. Really, the more shallow rooted things need to have more surface water, but that will work in the beginning. But in dry times, the swales are excellent for harvesting the water and keeping it down there, so that trees and bushes and so on can actually access that water over a long dry period. It really works. So that needs to be looked at in your design. I can't emphasize that enough, that you have a design that will actually put the swales, or these I have another one here. Can you see it? My screen's nearly black.
Yes. Yep, we can see
Okay,
it.
so food forest now, and there's a swale here, and I don't know if you can see it, but it is a depression, and it still works. I put this in long ago, and even though it's quite small, it still functions extremely well as a water catchment.
So
And
that's
everything here
filled with water when it's raining down heavily.
Sorry, what was that?
So this is all filled with water, that whole pathway.
Yeah. Yeah, well, just where the swales are, although when we had that huge fall, you know, in February, 300 millimetres I got in one day, everything was, even though this is on a slope, it looked like it was flat because there was a flood on the hill. So that if those swales get full, they will overflow into another system that I have for catching that water and moving it down. So here we have another swale that is just, it's just terrific. I wish I had photos of what it was like. I came down and took photos because it was so exciting. It doesn't slope because
Looks like we're losing Stephanie now. She's gone right up until the end with that phone battery. Really awesome stuff. But she's got a real properly sloping block, and she's capturing all the water that she can. I think it's fantastic. If she'd gone on, you would have also seen that she's got a bit of a pond right at the bottom of her yard as well. It's kind of like a detention pit, so that's also just catching that last little bit of water and letting that soak in before it's just holding on to that water. So it's a permaculture principle to catch and store energy, and water it, and catching and storing water is part of that. So we want to catch it, we want to store it, we want to slow it down, and we want to spread it. So any way you can find that when it's raining really heavily in your yard, that's a really good time to go out there and just sort of see where is the water currently going? Where is it pooling up? Is it pooling up in a place where you don't want it to be, or is it pooling up in a place where you think, oh, I have to make a few modifications and then I could actually make use of this? So it's getting out there and observing and seeing where the water's at, and then putting in a few different measures to see how you can work with that water that's coming in, that wonderful resource. So people, please post your questions. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so if any of you have any questions, just post them or raise your hand, and hopefully I'll be able to see that as well. I'll just go over to Matt. Matt, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Oh, just to reiterate what you're talking about there around go out and observe. When it's raining, get out into the garden, have a look at where the water's going. Ask yourself that question. What am I noticing? What are some of the things that are perhaps causing problems or not what I was expecting to happen in the garden? And then think, how can I utilize that? So, you know, if there's an excess amount of water somewhere, how can I utilize that? If the sun is really strong in one spot, how can I utilize that? So remember, nature is adaptive and things can grow and flourish in all sorts of conditions. So often what you're trying to do is match aspects of nature to the conditions that you're seeing and noticing, and in some cases using that nature to change those conditions. I saw a question from Nita around where can I do an intro course. So through Permaculture Sydney North, we'll be running some introduction to permaculture courses. We do them on a regular basis. At the moment, they're on pause until we can get back into face-to-face meeting mode. But there are full permaculture design courses that you can do. some of which are online. I'd highly recommend just jumping on things like Jeff Lawton. He's got an amazing number of videos that will give you some basics and introduction to permaculture principles. Moray Gamble is another one. Justin Rhodes. So lots of YouTubers that you can watch their videos and learn a lot from there, and plenty of books around as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Matt. There's just so many resources out there, and in these times when we're all housebound is the perfect time to get on and find some of those YouTube channels and get out some of those books. So we're also going to be active on the PSN page in the coming weeks as well, just sharing different resources that there are online, just to complement all of this live stuff that's going on. There's also plenty of high quality pre-recorded things that are online on YouTube that I've come across that I'd be really happy to share with people, as well as some great websites and ebooks. So going to go over to Selena now. Selena, what do you want to offer us as a closing remark?
Oh, as a closing remark, I guess some of it, like finding things like collecting and storing energy, things like compost, mulch, grass. For instance, clipped grass is actually an energy. It's taken energy from the sun to grow. It's taken water, and by popping that in my compost pile or finding ways to use it, then that's sort of also collecting energy and reusing it for my own purposes. Karen asked if my chooks are rescue chooks. No, they're not actually. I ended up getting one set from Rent-A-Chook and then the other set from a breeder up in Glenorrhy. So I think the rescue, I looked at some of the rescue options, but the rescue people seem to be a fair way out, and they sort of came and their chooks either had a big rush of them all at once, and I think at the times that they were looking, I was not looking. But the only thing about rescue chooks is sometimes they might not know how to scratch in the dirt because they're just used to laying eggs and sitting in one spot all day. So they may need to be taught a few basic things about being chickens.
That's it. Yeah, how to be a chicken 101.
How to be a chicken. Well, involves crouching down and scratching things to death, like garden yards, like, lawn yards. It's okay. It's grass. The grass will grow back.
It's a good life, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Good. That's great. So I think we're at the end of our hour now. I'll just unmute Matt as well if there's anything else you wanted to add. Otherwise, thank you all for joining. Be great if you could join us again for the next one. We're actually live again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We're looking to see if we can get someone else to join us as well for the second session. And what's the second one about is your garden abundance, how to get the most out of your garden. So it's going to be a great session. Looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you there. Anything else you guys wanted to add?
Get on it.
Yeah, get amongst it. Fantastic.
Start looking at your site and working out what you can do with what you got. And then, yeah, think about it, observe, and then go for it.
Awesome. All right, it's been great. And thank you so much to Matt, Selena, and Steph for taking us around their garden and giving us an insight into kind of the way of thinking and how these design principles hit the ground running. There's just so many different aspects to look at it through, and it's great to be able to share this with you guys, because you just hear just a slightly different perspective here and there, and it just really makes you think in a new way. It's very exciting. So guys, if you've enjoyed this, please just comment on the post that's on there on the Facebook page with any of your feedback and anything you'd like to see us do next time. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, and see you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.